Scientists studying DNA across Asia discovered something impossible to ignore. 16 million men alive today carry identical genetic markers on their Y chromosome, all traced to a single ancestor from the 13th century. One man's genetic signature spread across an entire continent within just a few generations. The mathematics revealed a horrifying truth. This level of genetic saturation could only happen through systematic rape on a scale that permanently rewrote human biology. That man was Genghis Khan. His empire didn't just conquer cities. It engineered sexual violence into military policy, creating a dual legal system where Mongol women lived, protected under laws that mandated death for any violation, while conquered women existed as legitimate plunder, sorted like grain and distributed among warriors. The contradiction was intentional. Within Mongol society, rape brought immediate execution. Outside their protection, rape became organized reward, carefully documented in administrative ledgers alongside arrows and horses. But this story isn't about the conquerors. It's about a silk merchant's daughter named Gulnar, who lived in Otrar, a wealthy trading city in 1218. She spent 30 years managing household accounts, arguing with carpet sellers, raising 3 sons. Her greatest rebellion was negotiating prices in the marketplace. Then, Otrar's governor executed Mongol trade envoys, melting silver into their ears while they screamed. Genghis Khan's response would introduce the world to something called the 3-day rule, and Gulnar would transform from merchant's wife into the military commander who made the Mongols remember that women could die holding weapons instead of chains. The 3-day rule worked with mathematical precision. When Mongol standards appeared on the horizon, city leaders faced a countdown. Surrender immediately and keep your lives, your property, your social structure intact. Resist 1 day and lose your leaders. Resist 2 days and lose your fighting men. Resist 3 days and lose everything. No exceptions. No mercy. The gradient of consequences created its own terrible momentum, and fear became the Mongols' greatest weapon. But what happened when a city chose annihilation over submission? What happened when women refused to wait passively for distribution among conquerors? The messenger who rode into Otrar in winter 1218 brought news that froze the city's blood. 50,000. Mongol warriors approached, led by Genghis Khan himself. Otrar had committed the ultimate transgression by murdering his envoys. The normal rules of conquest no longer applied. This would be personal. Gulnar watched from her bedroom window as the city council gathered. Her husband, the governor, had been assassinated 5 nights earlier, his blood still staining the council chamber floor. Her eldest son had fallen in a border skirmish months ago. Her middle boy died, defending a supply caravan. Now only Rashid remained, 17 years old and trying to sound like his dead brothers. The arithmetic of loss carved hollows in her chest, but grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. She entered the council chamber uninvited. Old men who had grown fat on trade routes argued about surrender terms, while General Karim slammed his fist on tables. These men expected the governor's widow to retreat into mourning, to let them handle war. Instead, Gulnar pulled out a leather portfolio containing her husband's notes, 15 years of defensive preparations, every weakness in the walls, hidden grain stores, supply calculations. "Give me tactical command," she said, and the chamber erupted. The vote came through desperation rather than conviction. With the governor dead and Mongol drums already echoing across the plains, tradition crumbled. Captain Yusuf knelt first, the young officer who had loved her middle son. Others followed until even General Karim submitted. A silk merchant's daughter had become Otrar's last hope, and word spread through the streets like wildfire. Within hours, women began arriving at the governor's palace, wives of dead soldiers, daughters of merchants, sisters who had lost brothers. They came carrying water jugs and bandage rolls, but their eyes held harder intentions. "We tend the wounded." The baker's widow spoke for the group, but Gulnar saw something else in their faces. These women understood the mathematics of defeat. They knew what happened to female survivors when cities fell. The Mongol system was precise. Young women distributed among warriors according to rank and merit. Older women marked for slavery or immediate execution, girls separated from mothers. Everyone sorted like livestock. But what if Otrar's women chose their own endings? The Mongol legal code drew a line, sharp as any blade. Within the empire's borders, women exercised power unimaginable in settled kingdoms. Mongol wives managed vast herds, while husbands campaigned. They negotiated trade agreements, moving silk and silver across continents. They advised on war and peace. The great Khatuns would rule entire regions, their word carrying the weight of law. Any Mongol man who raped a woman of the tribes faced immediate execution. No trial, no appeal, just death. But cross that border? The same warriors who would die for touching a Mongol woman could claim conquered women as casual plunder. The Yasa, Genghis Khan's law code, classified this with crystalline clarity. Rape within Mongol society. Death penalty. Rape of conquered women. Organized distribution protocol. Kill a Mongol woman. Torture execution. Kill a slave woman. Pay compensation to her owner. The human being herself had no legal standing, only her value to a Mongol master. This wasn't hypocrisy. It was intentional design. Mongol women learned from childhood that their protection depended entirely on remaining within the empire's circle of power. Young girls participated in hunts, learned to ride and shoot, could divorce unsatisfactory husbands while keeping dowries and children. They owned property, led military units, served as judges, but they also watched what happened to women outside that protection, understanding viscerally that submission to Mongol authority was the only shield against becoming property themselves. The system created perverse incentives, perfected through decades of conquest. Mongol warriors had every reason to keep captured women alive and relatively healthy, because dead slaves produced no children, no labor, no value. But beyond basic survival, no protections existed. Women represented reproducible wealth, future warriors, future slaves, future bargaining chips. The sorting process after each victory followed established protocols with mechanical efficiency, beautiful women to commanders, strong women as laborers, skilled women preserved for their crafts. Everyone else faced immediate categorization, determining whether they lived as property or died as waste. This dual reality would collide catastrophically at Otrar's walls, because Gulnar wasn't just organizing defense, she was arming women, teaching them to fight, preparing them to reject the careful categories of conquest entirely. The Mongols had conquered hundreds of cities, but they had never faced an enemy who weaponized their own assumptions about gender. They assumed women would cower and wait. Gulnar was about to prove that assumption could be fatal. The Mongol army appeared on the horizon like a plague of locusts, 50,000 warriors spreading across the plains with mechanical precision. War drums beat a specific rhythm. 3 strikes, followed by silence. The universal demand for submission. The 3-day countdown had begun. General Karim stood beside Gulnar on the highest tower, his knuckles white against stone. "They give us 3 days," his voice cracked. After that, he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew the mathematics. Cities that surrendered immediately might keep their social structures intact. Those that resisted briefly lost their leaders but kept some lives. But any settlement that fought past the third sunset faced complete annihilation. designed to serve as examples. A horn blast interrupted them. Mongol envoys rode forward under diplomatic banners, stopping just beyond arrow range. The final opportunity for negotiation had arrived. Gulnar descended to meet them, adjusting the ceremonial robe she had inherited from her dead husband's wardrobe. The jeweled dagger hung at her waist, a wedding gift that had never seen use beyond opening letters. Soon it might serve a different purpose. The Mongol general's scarred face revealed nothing as his interpreter translated the terms immediate surrender. Gates fully opened. All weapons surrendered. Population sorted for processing. In exchange, the Khan might show mercy. Gulnar asked him to define mercy. The answer came with clinical precision. Elderly would die quickly. Children under 10 spared for slavery. Women distributed among warriors according to established protocols. Craftsmen with valuable skills might live. Fighting men faced execution, but perhaps not torture. And if we resist? She already knew the answer, but needed her escorts to hear it, spoken aloud. The general gestured toward his vast army and spoke a single word that needed no translation. The interpreter provided it anyway, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Annihilation. That evening, as the first sunset marked the countdown's beginning, something unprecedented happened. 300 women appeared at defensive positions carrying crossbows, kitchen knives, and borrowed spears. The baker's widow had organized them into units with their own officers. What had begun as medical support had evolved into something that violated every assumption about warfare. When General Karim protested that women bearing arms was unnatural, Gulnar's response was simple: so is sorting human beings like grain. The Mongols changed the rules. We're adapting. But arming women was only the beginning. Gulnar had studied her husband's notes obsessively. She knew every hidden passage, every structural weakness, every supply cache. More importantly, she understood psychology. The Mongols expected defenders to break when faced with what would happen to their families. What if those families chose to fight instead? What if women refused to be the leverage that opened gates? The bombardment began at dawn on the second day. Mongol catapults worked with mechanical precision, each stone precisely aimed at structural weak points. By midday, 3 breaches gaped in the outer walls. Assault troops poured through like water through broken dams, and the fighting transformed from distant bombardment to intimate slaughter in narrow streets. The baker's widow's unit held the market square for 9 hours, turning merchant stalls into killing grounds. They had never held weapons before a week ago, but they fought with desperate ferocity that shocked even veteran Mongol warriors. Women appeared where least expected, striking from doorways before melting back into familiar terrain. A Mongol officer pursuing fleeing civilians into a dead-end alley learned this fatally. The civilians were bait. The women waiting with kitchen knives were the trap. His elite status meant nothing when 10 blades found every gap in armor. Such victories came dear and temporary. For every Mongol who fell, 3 defenders died. The mathematics ground inexorably toward 0. But something else was happening that the Mongols hadn't calculated. In conquered districts where sorting had already begun, survivors whispered about what they had seen. Women fighting, merchants' wives and fishmongers holding crossbows, the baker's widow taking 8 Mongols with her before falling. Stories that violated every assumption about conquest. Night fell on a city transformed into a charnel house. Perhaps 600 defenders still fought in scattered pockets. The women volunteers had been reduced to handfuls, their ranks decimated, but spirits unbroken. They had learned lessons no military manual taught, that choosing how you die matters, when you can't choose whether you live. On the 3rd morning, as the deadline expired, a Mongol general came to the walls under cover of darkness, His scarred face showed genuine curiosity about the woman who had transformed a merchant city into a fortress of martyrs. Through his interpreter, he made an offer that had never been extended before. You alone can leave. Take ship to distant lands. Live under another name. Your courage has earned this single mercy. But you must depart before dawn, and Otrar must open its gates. Gulnar stood at the wall, trembling.